There are moments in life where your heart breaks wide open, not because someone left, but because you finally saw them for who they truly were. You didn't see them when you held their hand. You didn't see them when you shared your dreams. You didn't see them even when you cried together. You saw them when they were gone. Let me tell you something tonight. Loss is not the end of vision. It's often the beginning of revelation. She needed to lose you, not because she didn't love you, not because she wasn't trying, but because your presence was too loud to hear what God was whispering. And I urge you, don't stop listening now, because this isn't a message about bitterness. This is a message about breakthrough. It's not about what you lost, it's about what you finally found in the silence. Stay with me, because before this message ends, I believe some of you will finally understand the reason God let her walk away, not to punish, but to awaken. You see, when you're surrounded by someone every day, their laughter, their presence, their warmth, it creates a fog. You mistake familiarity for understanding, but when they're gone, the fog lifts, the heart clears, and suddenly you see the truth. Maybe she saw who you really were only in your absence, when your words stopped echoing, when your comfort stopped numbing. It wasn't the presence that revealed you, it was the loss. Sometimes God will take someone out of your life, not to break you, but to open your eyes. He says, I need to remove this person so you can see them clearly, because while you were leaning on them, you weren't leaning on me. While you were trusting them, you weren't trusting my plan. She thought she loved you. Maybe she did. But it wasn't real love. It was built on need, on fear, on brokenness. But the light of separation exposed everything false. And in that light, she saw not just you, but herself. Now hear me on this. Your pain has a pulse. It is alive with purpose. When she lost you, it might have shattered her, but it also saved her. Saved her from clinging to a man when she was supposed to be clinging to her maker. Some of you need to hear this. You were not sent to save her. You were sent to reflect something greater. But when she made you the center, God had to intervene. He had to remove you, so she could stop bowing to your shadow and start standing in His light. She lost you, but maybe that's when she found herself. And maybe that's when you found clarity too. Because if you loved her, then let that love set her free. Let it become the fuel that drives you closer to the truth, not deeper into bitterness. So I say to you today, don't curse the distance, don't fight the silence. Don't mourn the space between you, because it is in that very space that truth is born. Yes, she needed to lose you to see you, but maybe you needed to lose her to see yourself. And above all, may we never forget. Sometimes it takes a goodbye to lead us back to God, and sometimes it takes a broken heart to give us new eyes. Would you like me to prepare this as a video script, sermon handout, or audio-friendly version next? Pain is one of the most honest teachers we will ever encounter in this life. It does not flatter. It does not hide the truth. It does not wait for permission to reveal what comfort tried to conceal. When someone walks out of your life, whether by choice or circumstance, pain doesn't just introduce you to their absence, it introduces you to the truth you couldn't see while they were near. You see, closeness creates a kind of blindness. We become so used to someone being part of our story that we stop questioning whether they were meant to be part of our destiny. We interpret their consistency as compatibility. We assume their presence is proof of purpose. But pain has a way of breaking that illusion wide open. It strips away the romanticism. It quiets the noise. And in the silence, we finally begin to see things for what they are, not what we wish them to be. There's a moment that often comes after loss. It doesn't happen right away. At first there's numbness, confusion, maybe anger. But then comes stillness. And in that stillness we start replaying conversations, remembering behaviors, noticing the signs we ignored. We begin to see that what we called love might have been codependence, that what we thought was loyalty might have been fear. That what felt like connection was more about comfort than truth. And this is the bitter gift of pain. It brings clarity, not all at once, not with ease, but with depth. And it's often the only way some people will ever stop dreaming and start discerning. She needed to lose you to see you, because the comfort of having you around blinded her. Your presence was too close, too familiar, too wrapped in routine. She didn't see how tired she was trying to earn your love. She didn't see how much she had been shrinking just to keep peace. She didn't see how many times she chose silence over speaking her heart because she feared being left. But when you were gone, the fog lifted. When she cried, the tears washed away the story she had been telling herself. And for the first time, she saw you, not as the man she built in her mind, but as the man who had been standing in front of her all along. Clarity doesn't come cheap. It is paid for in sleepless nights, in aching hearts, in prayers whispered into pillows. But it is worth every tear, because without pain we would still be chasing illusions. We would still be convincing ourselves that almost is enough. We would still be calling dysfunction destiny. And God, in His mercy, allows us to hurt, not because He enjoys our suffering, but because He knows that some truths are too bright to be seen in the daylight of ease. They require the night. They require the silence. They require the loneliness that finally makes us look up instead of around. That's when we see. That's when it all becomes clear. There are moments in life when God steps in and takes someone away, not to punish you, not to leave you broken, but to help you finally see. And in that moment, it won't feel like a blessing. It won't feel like divine intervention. It'll feel like heartbreak, like abandonment, like something sacred just got shattered. But when God removes someone from your life, it's rarely because they were meant to stay. More often, it's because their presence was blocking your vision. You couldn't see clearly with them in the picture. You couldn't hear God clearly with their voice in your ear. So God, in His mercy, removes what you would never release, not to destroy you, but to reveal what you were never willing to face. We pray for truth. We ask for clarity. We beg God to show us who's really for us, but we don't expect Him to answer with separation. We want the truth, but we want it to come softly. We want it to be convenient. We want to keep our comfort and still gain our wisdom. But that's not how revelation works. God removes to reveal. Sometimes, He takes away what we were leaning on because we were leaning in the wrong direction. He takes the crutch so we can learn to walk. He shuts the door so we'll stop waiting on someone who is never coming back. And it's not cruel, it's grace. Because if He left them in your life, you would have settled. You would have stayed. You would have missed what He was trying to build in you. There are people who cloud your discernment simply by being present, not because they're evil, not because they're your enemy, but because they speak louder than the voice of God in your life. And when someone becomes your focus more than your faith, God has to step in. He has to interrupt the connection. He has to break what you refuse to bend. And the pain of that removal, it will tear you open. You will question everything. You'll wonder if you did something wrong, if you prayed incorrectly, if you misunderstood the signs, but in time you'll see it clearly. God was answering your prayer for wisdom with a loss that felt like punishment, but was really protection. She didn't just lose you. God removed you. Because if she kept you, she would have missed herself. She would have kept pouring into something that was draining her. She would have kept calling survival love. So He intervened. And it may have broken her for a moment, but it also woke her up. Suddenly, the fog lifted. Suddenly, she saw patterns she ignored. Suddenly, she remembered who she was before. She tried so hard to be what you needed. And that's the revelation. You weren't the gift. The removal was. Not because you're worthless, not because you were the villain, but because your chapter in her life had served its purpose. And when God says that something is done, it doesn't matter how much history is behind it. What matters is the future He's trying to write. And sometimes that future can only begin after the removal. What we often call love isn't love at all. It's attachment. It's habit. It's the comfort of familiarity dressed up as devotion. Real love is clear-eyed. It doesn't cling out of fear. It doesn't lose itself to hold on to someone else. But attachment, now that's different. Attachment binds itself not to the person, but to the feeling they give you, to the sense of worth, of being needed, of not being alone. And when that's what's anchoring you to someone, you'll tolerate things you should never accept. You'll shrink when you should grow. You'll call compromise a virtue and silence a strategy. But none of that is love. It's just fear in disguise. She didn't see the difference at first. She thought she loved you. She thought her staying power proved it. She mistook her anxiety for passion, her dependency for loyalty. And when people warned her, when her heart whispered that something felt off, she silenced those voices because she was afraid. Afraid that letting go of you would mean facing herself. Afraid that without you she wouldn't recognize her own reflection. But that's what attachment does. It builds a story around someone and tells you that your identity is incomplete without them. That story gets repeated so often, it becomes your truth. And so you stay, not because it's right, but because leaving would collapse everything you've built your worth upon. But love doesn't do that. Love is not afraid of the truth. It doesn't require you to lose yourself. It doesn't demand silence in exchange for peace. Love speaks, love sees, love discerns. And real love always leads to freedom, not fear. When she lost you, the story cracked open. The fantasy shattered. And for the first time, she saw the difference between the man she hoped you were and the man you actually were. It wasn't hatred, it wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. And that clarity hurt, because it exposed how deep her attachment had gone, how much she gave while ignoring how little she received. It showed her how much of her worth she had tied to your presence. See, attachment will keep you in rooms where you no longer belong. It will convince you that chaos is normal, that confusion is part of passion, that exhaustion is what it means to fight for someone. And so, when God finally allows something to break, when the separation comes, it feels like grief, but it's really grace. She needed to lose you, not just to see you, but to see herself, to see how she'd been settling, to see how long she'd been surviving instead of living, to understand that what she called love was really fear, the fear of being alone, the fear of starting over, the fear of confronting the truth. But when the fear was forced to leave with you, the real healing began. Because love never asks you to disappear. It asks you to show up, fully, freely, and without fear. And what she had with you wasn't that. Not because she was weak, but because her heart had been taught that attachment was safer than truth. And now she knows better. It doesn't always begin with light. Sometimes the most important journey starts in the darkness. In that moment when everything you trusted falls apart, when the person you built your future around walks away, or worse, stays, but leaves you starving emotionally. That fall, the shattering of your plans, the silence after the final goodbye, the ache that settles in your chest when your soul finally stops pretending. It doesn't feel holy. It feels humiliating. It feels empty. But what no one tells you in that moment is this: the fall isn't the end. It's the first step toward freedom. You see, sometimes you don't know you're in chains until someone leaves. Sometimes you don't realize you were building a prison with your own hands, calling it love, calling it loyalty, calling it working things out, when in truth, you were just avoiding the pain of letting go. So God lets it collapse. Not because He's cruel, but because He knows you'll never walk into the light while you're still trying to rearrange the furniture in the dark. And so He lets it fall. He lets it break, because He knows what that breaking will awaken. She fell. When she lost you, when the calls stopped coming, when the space between you grew colder than the lies you both told to make it last, she fell. And in that fall, she discovered something she never saw while standing tall trying to hold everything together. She had power. Power she'd forgotten. Vision she had buried. Worth she had traded for crumbs. And that's what the fall does. It strips away the illusions, the performances, the pleasing, the pretending. You can't fake strength when you're on your knees. You can't fake peace when you're surrounded by pieces. And so, for the first time in a long time, she faced the truth without makeup, without filters, without fear. And maybe that's the point. Maybe we have to fall before we can rise, not because we're weak, but because we've built our strength in all the wrong places. In people, in approval, in performance, in being chosen by someone who didn't even choose themselves. And when all of that falls away, when the bottom gives out, that's when we find the foundation that never shakes. That's when we stop reaching for people and start reaching for God. That's when we stop asking, why did they leave me? And start asking, why did I ever think I needed them to stay? Freedom doesn't come through control. It comes through surrender. And surrender doesn't happen at the top. It happens at the bottom. She needed to fall to stop flying in circles. She needed to fall to realize she was chasing love in a place it never lived. And though it looked like heartbreak, it was actually heaven breaking in. The fall is never the end. It's just the sound of something false finally hitting the ground, so that the truth can begin to rise. When someone loves you deeply, they don't always realize where the line between admiration and dependency begins to blur. She didn't see it at first. She looked at you and saw strength. She saw calm. She saw direction. You became her compass, her reason, her sense of identity. In her mind, she wasn't just with you. She was anchored to you. And little by little, she gave parts of herself away in exchange for closeness. Not because you demanded it, but because she believed that losing pieces of herself was the cost of being loved. And in doing so, she turned you into something you were never meant to be. Her savior. But you were never her Messiah. You were her mirror. You reflected back to her what she believed about herself. When she felt strong, you celebrated her. When she felt weak, she looked to you to hold her together. But that's the danger of confusing love with salvation. You cannot fix what you didn't break. You cannot heal wounds you didn't cause. You can't be someone's foundation and their fantasy at the same time. And God, in His mercy, saw where it was heading. He saw how tightly she was gripping your presence, not because of who you were, but because of who she couldn't face being without you. And so, He allowed the breaking. He allowed the separation. Because if she stayed with the illusion, she would never wake up to the truth. It was never your job to complete her. That's not love. That's idolatry. And even if you had the best intentions, even if you truly cared, you could not carry the weight of her identity. That was never yours to hold. You were her mirror. You reflected her hopes, her insecurities, her dreams, her fears. She saw in you what she didn't yet know how to see in herself. But mirrors can only show you so much. They cannot change you. They cannot heal you. And when she began to expect from you what only God could give, peace, purpose, wholeness, the relationship became a burden neither of you could carry without breaking. So she had to lose you. Not because you were evil, not because you didn't try, but because she needed the space to rediscover the voice she had silenced to keep you near. She needed to wake up from the dream of being saved by love and understand that real salvation doesn't come through romance. It comes through surrender. She needed to look into the mirror and not see you anymore. She needed to see herself, to see the worth that doesn't rise and fall with someone else's presence, to see the calling that doesn't wait for permission, to see the strength that was never dependent on being chosen. And maybe now you see it too, that you were never meant to be her God. You were meant to be a glimpse, a reflection, a temporary companion on a much bigger journey, one that only began the moment she realized you couldn't carry her any further. We grow up believing that healing begins when someone explains why they hurt us. We wait for the apology, the long talk, the honest moment where everything finally makes sense. We convince ourselves that if they could just say the right words, if we could just have one more conversation, then maybe we could move on in peace. But life and heartbreak don't often give us that courtesy. People leave. People change. People grow silent right when we're ready to speak. And in that silence, we're left with the echo of what was never said. The apology that never came. The questions that were never answered. And this is where the deepest kind of healing begins. The kind that doesn't depend on someone else's words. The kind that comes when you realize closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes, it's a decision. She wanted answers. She thought losing you would bring clarity. But all it brought at first was confusion, chaos, and grief. She replayed the memories, rehearsed the arguments, drafted imaginary messages in her mind. She thought if she could, just say one more thing, or if you would, it would bring peace. But the longer the silence lasted, the more she began to hear something deeper than words. The truth. Not your version, not her version, but the truth. That no matter how many conversations you had, it wouldn't have fixed what was already finished. That no matter how well either of you could explain your pain, it wouldn't rewrite what had been lived. That what she was really waiting on wasn't closure from you, it was permission from herself to let go. And this is what most people never understand. Closure doesn't come when the other person talks. It comes when you stop waiting for them to. It comes when you stop looking backward to be healed and start looking inward to be whole. She thought she needed you to validate her story. To say, yes, I see it now. You were right. I was wrong. You were enough. But she didn't. Because God had already seen. God had already been witness to every tear she cried, every boundary she bent, every moment she made herself smaller to make things work. And when your silence stretched longer than her strength could bear, that's when the healing started. Not because she understood everything, but because she finally accepted that she didn't need to. She didn't need the conversation. She needed the clarity that only distance could bring. She needed to find her voice in the silence, her peace in the unanswered questions, her strength in the space where your presence used to be. And she found it. Not all at once. Not easily. But day by day, she stopped waiting for the words that would fix the pain. She started writing a new story with the ones she spoke to herself. I am still here. I am still worthy. I am still becoming. And that, in the end, is the truest kind of closure. The kind that comes not when someone gives you peace, but when you choose it for yourself. And now, after every tear shed in silence, after every unanswered question, after every memory that once brought pain, now slowly becoming a page turned, we arrive at the truth. She needed to lose you, not because you were the enemy, not because there was no love, but because the version of herself that kept clinging to you was never meant to survive. That loss was not punishment. It was permission. Permission to finally see, not just you, but herself. She didn't lose love. She lost the illusion that love had to cost her everything. She didn't lose a future. She was rescued from a past that would have repeated itself. She didn't lose you to become bitter. She lost you so she could become better, stronger, wiser, whole. And maybe now you understand your place in her story. You weren't the ending. You were the turning point. God used the breaking to open her eyes, not to shame her, but to shape her, not to destroy, but to deliver. He took what felt like the center of her world and removed it so he could finally take his rightful place. And now she sees, clearly, boldly, truthfully. So to anyone still holding on to what already let go of you, to anyone begging for closure that's never coming, to anyone confusing attachment with love or staying with strength, hear this. What leaves your life when it's time to grow is not a loss. It's a divine release. And when God allows something to fall apart, it's because he's building something stronger from what's left. The chapter is over. The lesson was written in tears but sealed with grace. She needed to lose you, yes, but only so she could finally see everything she was always meant to become.